everyone, this is Renee with Delaney Jane Cards. Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be making this dancer card, and I used the Simon Says Stamp and Colorado Crafts collaboration set. It's part of the Stamptember release, but even if this stamp isn't available anymore, it currently is as of me voicing this over, but if it isn't, this is more about the technique than the stamp. So here I had picked 3 pattern papers. I ended up only using 2 of those and changing out the third one, but I am stamping this image onto some Nina 80-pound solar white cardstock, and then I am going to be stamping each of these dresses onto a piece of pattern paper. I chose to heat emboss them, and you can see my stamp was a little bit dirty still, but it didn't really matter. And I I shifted the paper so it didn't come out nice and clean. But I did choose to heat emboss these. I stamped them in VersaFine, Onyx Black, and then I used clear embossing powder. I stamped each of the dancing girls onto different pattern papers, and I chose really small patterns because, well, the dresses wouldn't have giant patterns on them, in my mind anyway. And I wish I would have shifted this one up just a little bit because you'll see here I don't get all of the image, all of the dress image, and later on well, I ended up having to adjust my card a little bit just to make up for that. So here I heat emboss them. This makes paper piecing so much easier. Highly recommend, highly recommend clear embossing. So I had all my images and I set them aside, and I began my Copic coloring. Now this card is for a young lady that my cousin is adopting, and I wanted to match her skin tone as much as possible, and I think I did a pretty good job, and I think the skin tone on these young ladies looks so beautiful. It's got so much depth. I picked where I thought the shadows would be, and the way they're standing, the shadows, I think they'd be where I put them. And then I filled in the spaces and blended out. I did go lightest, then darkest, then all the way out to my lightest again. I don't feel like I always have to put in lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, because sometimes the area is too small, and then I oversaturate, and then my coloring will bleed, just because I think I put down too much marker sometimes. I don't know, maybe the marker touches the paper too much and it oversaturates it anyway. And then I just made sure I reinforced the shadows here with this E79. And then I decided to shade each of these images here. First I was just going to shade the skirts, and I was going to just paper piece the skirts, and then that's where the problem with not having stamped the blue ballerina as well, because then I decided to use the whole outfit and hers wasn't all there, so then I had to trim down this image even more. But here you can see I'm shading. It is clear embossing powder, so even if my marker was to color it, it's over black ink, so I wasn't too worried. But shading these definitely adds so much depth to the images. This one in particular, I used my B90s here on this blue pattern paper, and even though you can still see the pattern, which was the goal of the paper piecing, it added so much depth to the image. So then here's where I decided to finish and shade the rest of the image. Then I did cut these out with my little scissors. These are actually embroidery scissors from my ex-mother-in-law, and I love them. They're like the most perfect little fussy cutting scissors. You don't always need the newest, latest, and greatest. As I sit here and I make a card with the latest and greatest, you don't always need that. The only part that I found incredibly frustrating on these images was the way her hands are. It is time consuming to paper piece around them. I just tried my best, and I didn't do a bad job. It was a little more difficult than I guess I had originally thought. I mean, had her hands been away from her dress, I guess the image wouldn't look as cool. I finished up my fussy cutting here, and because the embossed edges are raised, it makes fussy cutting an image like this really easy. And then I pulled out those markers I used to shade with, and I colored their shoes to match their outfits. So the parameters for this card is my cousin is adopting her, and she loves shoes. So I made sure I picked an image that had really cute shoes. I also took my marker, one of my midtones, and kind of colored the edges of the outfit a little bit, just in case I didn't exactly match it up. It would still be gray or blue or tan. I did take this memento, or no, it's not a memento, it's a Tombow dark gray marker, and I went around the edges of my paper piecing. It just finishes everything off nicely so there's no white edges. And I adhered all that down. All this to say that this card, I really didn't have any more of a plan than to paper piece the images, and the card layout kind of happened organically, I guess. So this gray one here, it just had that one little piece on the side, otherwise it was all one piece. So I finished up the shoes, and then that middle girl has socks. I also colored those in with the same tans that I used for, or beige, or what, that's all the kind of the same color, right? And then I needed to decide what I was going to do with this card. And I didn't want to cut it with a die because I didn't have anything that would be wide enough to make sure I got all their arms in. And if I did that, I wasn't going to be sure that I had that border straight. And I liked gold with it. See, here's my thought process. I'm trying all the things. So I trimmed this down, and then I realized I needed to trim it down even more because I wanted to make sure that I cut her off so there was no weird pieces up at the top. And then I grounded them. I used an E70 to ground them. It's kind of a grayer brown color. This is just some tonic paper here, and what I did is I cut a strip, and then I die cut both edges, and then just use my scissors to cut it in half. This way I could line up the scallops and not worry about if I had if I die cut it properly, I could just make sure they were lined up and just trim off the edges with my scissors. So far I've got there, and then I had die cut this daughter word out of some white and out of that gold, and I was going to just stack this with the white and then the gold. And in the process of peeling it out of the paper, I cracked the top of it, or maybe it was while I was picking this stuff out of here. I don't know if my machine just didn't have enough pressure, if I should have added a shim, but this daughter did not cut out of the white very nice. Cut out of the gold just fine, so I'm not sure what the deal was. But I cracked or marred the surface just a little bit, and then I decided I would just use the second layer here of the gold instead of sticking it in my stamp pocket, die pocket thing. So I just put another layer over top, which was fine because that made it stand out just a little bit more on the finished card. These are kind of fiddly. I don't know. I don't always reach for these ones, but in particular, since she's adopting her, I wanted to make sure that it said daughter on it because I know that that is a huge deal. So here I pulled out that blue pattern paper I used for the end dancer there. I decided I was going to use that to frame my image. And I had pulled out some stamps. I think it says happy birthday to an amazing daughter. I ended up just using the happy birthday. Here I was just measuring, making sure that I had enough of this paper left over so that I could frame up my image panel. And I still had no idea where I was going as far as layout. It all does just kind of happen. Sometimes it's nice when cards happen organically like that. I do love to have a plan, but sometimes it's just nice to sit and create. So here I was deciding that I wanted to, or where I wanted to put the happy birthday, and I decided to heat emboss this in gold. So I stamped it with my Versa Mark ink, and then I used, I think it's Simon Says Stamp Gold, Ultrafine Gold or something like that, embossing powder, and it looks beautiful on that card. And then it also matches the daughter and that lawn fawn border that I used, both cut out of the tonic paper. So here I kind of, when I make a card organically like this, I kind of finish each step that I know already, and then I just wait for the rest of it to happen. So here I knew that I wanted that daughter die cut on there, and I wanted this on that blue card or blue pattern paper. I trimmed it all off, which did trim off the end of that daughter word, but it was fine. And then I was trying to decide if I put this on black, how much of the black I wanted to show. And I think that's just some black out of my stash. I don't know what brand it is. Oh, I was measuring here. I still haven't made it to the A2 size card panel, so I knew I needed to do more. And then I decided on white, and I just used the rest of this white here, and this is some cheap white cardstock, which is probably why it didn't die cut very nice. Used my art glitter glue to adhere these because it was in front of me, and it lets me wiggle things around just a little bit, not much. Art glitter glue is pretty sticky. So I kind of liked this, but I wasn't sold on it being finished. And I pulled out these peel-offs from Love from Lizzie, and I decided that the gold was pretty similar, so I put a peel-off there. And I know I could have trimmed them off and all that, but I didn't. I just wrapped it around the back. I sometimes worry if I cut them off that they would peel up. I don't think they would, but I don't know, maybe. And then I liked that, but I didn't think it was finished. So then I took a thicker one, I think it's the thickest one, and I put it on the edge of the white cardstock. And I liked how that looked, but it still didn't feel finished. In one of the first Love from Lizzie kits that she had, I think it was Love from Lizzie, there was this really cool sticker, and you can see I've used quite a few of them, but I think I've had them for years, but I thought that would fit in there perfectly. It kind of resembles maybe a dress pattern, and I thought that finished off the edges of this card just gorgeous. And then I added a little bit of shimmer to their shoes and their dresses. I wanted these cards to be, or this card in particular, to be just super special for this young lady. And there you go, that's the card. There are some still shots with a few details here at the end. I'd love to know what you think. And like I said, it's more about the technique than the image. So if you don't have this image, you can still paper piece. I would love to chat with you in the comments, and you'll see another video on your screen if you'd like to keep watching. Thanks for stopping by.